You won't believe what I discovered that Tuesday morning in September 2025. It was like walking alone at night and suddenly realizing someone's been following you. I was doing my usual property inspection on my old ATV, something I'd been putting off for a couple months because work had been absolutely insane. My grandfather, simple Daniel Palmer, carved every fence post by hand and treated this mountain property like sacred ground. He'd established the land back in 1952, and I inherited it when he passed in 1989. His gravestone, carved with the words "Palmer Family Land Forever," stood at the heart of our little family cemetery on a ridge with panoramic views. I rounded the final bend, one that always opened to a view of that stone, and my brain hit the brakes. Instead of the familiar memorial, there stood a luxury cabin. Stone fireplace, wraparound deck, granite everything, copper gutters. Not just any cabin, a resort-grade build plopped precisely where that marker belonged. I stared for at least 5 minutes, phone in hand, capturing time-stamped GPS photos. This wasn't a mistake. No misplaced boundary lines. This felt intentional, calculated. A structure had been grafted onto my family's history without my permission. My buddy Jake Morrison, my partner in maintenance and biggest skeptic, had joked just last month, "Mountain property like this is a lottery ticket. Someone's always going to try to swipe it." But even he looked unsettled when he arrived. I'd always known this land meant more to me than square footage. But now I realized someone wanted to bury our legacy under luxury, and from the build quality, they had the money and the audacity to do it. Approaching the cabin, I felt like I was trespassing on my own property. It was gorgeous. River rock foundation, hand-hewn logs, raw copper downspouts. But beauty doesn't override ownership, and no one had permission to build. While I was photographing everything and trying to steady my racing thoughts, I heard a car engine behind me. An expensive, polished vehicle dripped money. A well-dressed woman stepped out. Perfect blonde hair, confident stride, leather briefcase that could have weighed as much as my mortgage. She knew my name. "Mr. Palmer," she said. "I'm Claire Jenkins, president of the Elkridge Heritage Council. We need to talk." I didn't know whether to be impressed or terrified. She was calm, professional, almost bored. She handed me a stack of sealed, notarized documents on fancy letterhead. The easement agreement, signed by my grandfather on September 15, 1987, granting expansion rights to her organization. I went numb. The docs looked legitimate. Witnesses, seals, even a county notary stamp. But his signature was nothing like the trembling scrawl in his final years, confident and even. My grandfather was meticulous about records. He'd never given this away silently, especially not land with his own memorial stone. I told her that. Her smile was condescending. "Memory is unreliable," she said. "Family stories can omit crucial details. I'm sure your grandfather understood the broader value of this land." I could feel my knuckles tighten around the phone. That's when Rebecca called. My wife, former legal assistant turned our personal watchdog. "Don't sign anything," she hissed through the line. "Take photos, get GPS coordinates. Don't let them know you're gearing up to fight." I explained what was happening, and she pivoted into strategist mode immediately. Claire praised my wife's smarts, told me I should understand fighting would cost a fortune and be futile. They had documentation. But something in her voice unsettled me. Pride laced with disdain. That night, we laid everything out across the kitchen table. Property records, photos, family letters, deeds that alleged easement. Rebecca played handwriting detective, comparing the 1987 signature with my grandfather's will from 1989. The difference was obvious. Bold, practiced strokes versus shaky lines from a failing hand. Someone had likely used a younger, healthier sample to forge the signature. But where would they have gotten decades-old handwriting examples? That question haunted me. The next afternoon, Claire called with a compromise. No more documents, she'd show me the historical significance on the land itself. She invited me back to see archaeological evidence. I agreed, bringing Jake as a witness and my phone ready to roll. Claire showed up with a man introduced as Dr. Michael Stevens, an archaeologist specializing in Colorado indigenous sites. He pointed to random stone arrangements and claimed they were ceremonial fire circles. He produced arrowheads and pottery fragments, found that morning. He narrated soil indentation patterns as habitation evidence. I looked at Jake. Neither of us had ever seen anything like that here. Then Jake whispered, quietly, "Those arrowheads look fake, like ones from souvenir stalls. The stones had leftover mortar. We've used those rocks from the build site. The pottery was cleanly broken, not weathered, and the circle was in a spot that floods in spring." I pointed these out, and Stevens deflected with jargon. When I asked about other regional sites, like the Linen-Meyer digs known statewide, Stevens stumbled. He cut the conversation short, disappeared. Meanwhile, Claire pivoted to environmental messaging. Soil protection, erosion control, the cabin protects the watershed. I noticed the foundation actually redirected rain to compact channels and cut down mature trees. Her calm chatter continued as Jake tested the soil science, pressing her consultant on slope stability. She came unglued, lecturing about unqualified questions, but then Deputy Morgan, called in for oversight, radioed the State Environmental Office. They said no one named Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the state geologist she'd just introduced, was dispatched here, and no such vehicle existed for the state. The woman, who Claire had introduced as Dr. Walsh, packed up, but Claire coolly shifted again. She insisted environmental review must halt demolition. She called county officials from her phone on speaker, claiming urgent permits and investigation. The deputy had to pause everything. Even though her expert turned out to be fake, Claire turned that exposure into authority, flooding permits, bureaucratic delays, postponing justice. But I noticed something else that changed everything. When Walsh was packing up, Claire's purse tipped over. Among her files were photocopies of my grandfather's original deeds, military records, and personal boîte letters, private papers no one outside our family should have. The implications were terrifying. This wasn't random. She'd been researching my family intimately for months. When I confronted her, she casually said, "Thorough research is essential for heritage preservation." Her tone, a predator preening, shock drove me silent. That night, I couldn't sleep. If she had access to those documents, what else did she know? A fake archaeologist, fake geologist, forged vehicle, forged documents. It all pointed to a highly organized scheme. The next morning, Deputy Morgan called. The feds were now interested. They saw patterns involving organized inheritance fraud connected to fake environmental protections. That brought a sliver of relief, but also dread. Then my life twisted again when Jake's wife, Mark Jenkins, discovered a hidden folder on Claire's computer. What he found was horrifying. Digital dossiers, fake social media personas, psychological profiles, manipulative messaging campaigns, accounts posing as neighbors, environmental activists, locals, all designed to sway public opinion for Claire's projects. Fake petitions, coordinated Facebook posts, orchestrated community sentiment, all manufactured. And Claire had detailed files on each of us, our spending, routines, marriage status, litigation tolerance, vulnerabilities. She'd stalked us with data brokers, surveillance tools, psychological charts. Then came the timeline, plans mapped to break families financially and emotionally over 18 months, legal pressure in month 3, tax challenges in month 6, settlement offer by month 12. The spreadsheet had cold headings like vulnerabilities, trigger points, capitulation threshold. She'd even set aside budgets for bribes and influence campaigns. Beneath the documents lay resort development contracts, clearing forests, diverting streams, creating a helipad, crafting golf greens in a drought area, all under the guise of preserving the environment. The irony burned. And there was more. My grandfather had left a half-finished draft letter in the drawer, a draft to request a conservation easement to preserve the land for our family. He'd intended to protect it from developers. That intention had been perverted into being used to steal from us. Mark confessed that Claire had funded the family life, home, cars, college savings, on stolen wealth. He said in a decaf motel parking lot, teary, "Every bill I paid was built on someone else's misery." Mark broke. He gave me the USB with all the files. That night, we watched a recording he'd made. Claire's operation laid bare. She'd even admitted the families who sold willingly had no choice. She joked about families waking up to missing medication, stirring court pressure, framing us all into submission. The audio made my blood freeze. She wasn't just a con artist, she was a predator willing to interfere with life-saving medicine, emotional manipulation, hush violence. The following court hearing brought more shock. A local judge had all the property paperwork and her pretense of legitimacy. Then, an elderly widow walked to the bench, removed her cardigan, and introduced herself as FBI Special Agent Patricia Patterson. She'd been investigating inheritance fraud and elder abuse for 18 months. Her revelation shook the courtroom. Claire's operation spanned 6 states, over 90 families, more than $12 million in stolen property. And she dropped the bomb. "We're investigating whether some of her victims died under suspicious circumstances." Fear turned cold. Prosecutors painted a bleak grid of forged signatures, staged experts, manipulated courts, stolen family properties, and even deaths shortly after litigation started. The pattern was clear. Claire looked stunned for the first time. She wasn't in control. The federal indictment expanded into organized criminal enterprise, including elder abuse, racketeering, data crimes. She offered to cooperate, reducing her sentence to 15 years and avoiding the death penalty for some homicides. But the network went deep. Over 400 victims, stolen properties, shells, offshore accounts. The court heard testimonies and the extent of damage. Families isolated, community trust eroded, environmental destruction planned. Local officials bribed. In sentencing, the prosecutors revealed a trove of evidence discovered during search warrants. Over 300 gigabytes of files showing documented fraud, trophies of manipulation, videos, victim profiles, email logs, spreadsheets. And there was a video diary. Claire, calm, coaching future accomplices on targeting grieving families, manipulating court pressure, orchestrating medication shortages. It was cinematic, but real. The court watched, hearts pounding. In the end, the defense crumbled. Her crime was not local folly, it was organized evil. Asset forfeiture seized her house, bank accounts, artwork, jewelry. Restitution was awarded to victims. 4 and 2 help us. The federal agents restored our property, removed the fake easement, and returned that memorial stone to its rightful place. Rebecca and I built a garden around it, placing native Colorado plants and a second stone engraved with the names of 23 Colorado families victimized between 2019 and 2025. Agent Patterson joined us and said our case had inspired new laws protecting inherited property and targeting digital elder abuse. Jake raised a toast, a beer for stubborn families who wouldn't let criminals rewrite history. Mark approached me afterward, voice soft. "I lived with a monster, but you helped me see who I really am. Thank you for giving me the chance to do the right thing." 2 years later, Patterson handed me a classified file about my grandfather. He'd been a government surveyor who helped establish wilderness boundaries in Colorado. His work had been key to preservation, exactly the legacy Claire wanted to destroy. Then she paused. "By the way," she asked gently, "were you ever told exactly how your grandfather died?" And for the first time in decades, I didn't have an answer. If this made you say, "No way, that's real," maybe it's worth asking. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover their identity was a lie? How did that change everything you thought you knew? Thanks for listening.